Greetings and a warm welcome from me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today, in the latest of my deep dive videos, I'm going to explore the retrograde of Chiron, the wounded healer, which begins on July the 23rd and goes on for 19 weeks through to December the 6th. Now, I'm going to explore the event chart for this because it's really intriguing that Chiron, currently in the sign of Aries, where it first entered in April 2018 before returning back into Pisces and then arriving on February the 18th, 2019, back into Aries. The actual house that Chiron is in, based on Universal Central Time and Greenwich, is the 6th house. That's also the same location as the North Node. So the 6th house is very much about purification, can be about the physical body, can be about our health, organisation, where we provide services to others. But in a natal chart, the position of Chiron will show where someone will be particularly supportive and perhaps very skilled at relating to others with their issues. But it also will be the point in that chart, depending on the sign and house, where they feel they get the least back from others. So it's said to be the wound we can never heal. Now, to try to explore this, I'm going to share the natal event chart with you of this particular retrograde. The last one that occurred last year was actually in the 4th house, and we've seen that the housing market and our sense of security has been really afflicted since that time. But this one, the 6th house, offers real opportunities. So I'm just going to explain some of the themes of Chiron, but I'm also going to share with you the birth charts of Rowling, of Elon Musk. I don't have a time for him, so I'm going to use a solar chart on him, but I'm also going to look at Britney Spears' natal chart as well, to try to understand what's going on with those three very famous people, so you can relate into what this Chiron issue is specifically about. Now, underneath this video, you can also download a free 7-page PDF that I've written specifically about Chiron. It tells you all about the mythology, how Jung got into the concept of Chiron before the actual entity itself. So he was exploring the mythology, but the actual entity wasn't discovered until the 70s. And there's still disputes over what the actual status of Chiron is. Some people say it's a planetoid, some people say it's a comet, some people say it's a kind of asteroid. But one thing we do know is it has a very unusual and eccentric orbit, which takes 50 years. So when we get around to our 50th birthday-ish, that's when we have our Chiron return, and that's what Elon Musk had 2 years ago. So that's going to be intriguing to look at that. I'm then going to go on to share with you what this means for each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can relate to in terms of your sun or your ascendant. If you're new to my channel, it's lovely to have you with us. I do try to interact with as many comments as possible. It's very much a community, so do share your thoughts, and also I'd be honoured if you would subscribe. If you're a returning visitor, it's great to have you with me once more. Now, I just want to tell you about a very special opportunity. If you want to find out where your natal Chiron is, your birth Chiron, but also the house it's in, and get an understanding of how I view those positions for you, you can order your year 2024 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data now, and I'll prepare for you the rest of year 2023 free of charge. But also in my 30% offer, you can also get your character analysis report, including those references to Chiron. But this also is a life roadmap and will help you to understand the patterns that have gone round in your situation, the more positive ones, but also the more challenging ones, and get a much more intimate relationship with them. Please see the link beneath this video for more. So on the screen now, I'm showing the natal birth chart of this event. And you can see, based on Universal Central Time and Greenwich, Chiron is in house 6. The standout angle to another influence is Mercury in the very proud Leo, and right at the top of the chart in the 10th house. Interesting. Mercury very much about communication. In the sign of Leo, can be a bit stubborn because of the fixed energy. So we need to be flexible. But I feel what Mercury can do is we can all download from the global community different ways of thinking about how we can approach our health, because Chiron in the 6th house is really asking us all to be mindful of our physical well-being. Now, the interesting thing, of course, is because the North Node has just inversed into the sign of Aries too, it's around about, what is it, about 9 degrees apart. Some astrologers take into account up to 10 degrees on some key aspects. I tend to have a much tighter orb because I feel it's more influential. But what we could say is that the North Node on this event is telling us to listen to the energy that Chiron can advise us. The retrograde is asking us to look more deeply inside. So Chiron's always teaching us lessons, but the retrograde in particular, those lessons can come a little bit more intensely. But of course, on the other side of the heavens, we have the South Node, where we're coming from in the 12th house, very much to do with the psychology of our situations. So we could emerge from a degree of fear and self-doubt, the 12th house, into a greater sense of clarity by simplifying elements of our existence, very 6th house. So purity, 6th house energy, very much akin to the sign of Virgo. Purity and being more discriminating about how we use our time could be something we could gain from this retrograde through this next 5 months. The 6th house can also be, of course, to do with work, and the world of work is absolutely indubitably changing at quite a pace. It's not just AI, it is also work from home, it's robotics, it's the power of big technology companies, which, you know, rivals the biggest of the superpower governments in some ways because of the information they have, but also probably outstrips the power of some smaller countries' governments, such as the might of technology. So we're all having to adjust, but maybe we're a little bit too much glued to our screens, including me. So Mercury, the planet of communication and of commerce, in the 10th house is how we're connecting to the world and how we're receiving information. So that could be a good time to learn new skills. When Mercury's in the 10th house, retraining, repurposing old talents and experiences, but in a new way, can be something that can be very profitable. So if we use the information gathering of Mercury in Leo, which is earnest and passionate and warm, to feed into the energy of Chiron in the sign of Aries, which is very much to do with identity. So we've got an awful lot going on in society at the moment about identity. So I feel that since 2018, when Chiron initially entered into Aries, that roar for greater recognition for people who might see themselves as minorities has become much stronger. Now, how long is Chiron going to be in Aries? Well, it does travel into the sign of Taurus on June the 19th in 2026, but then it retrogrades back into Aries on September the 17th, 2026, but it does terminate for the longer term in the sign of Taurus on April the 14th, 2027. So this particular journey through the sign of Aries is in total, taking into account the initial retrograde back into Pisces and then the one into Taurus and back into Aries, is 9 years in total. Now, it's said that Chiron has a flavour of both Saturn, the planet of structure, but also potential limitation and restriction and fear, and Uranus, the maverick planet, which is very much about experimentation, higher truths, but can be rather erratic. Now, interesting, isn't it, that they're both the due rulers or co-regents of the sign of Aquarius. But it says that Chiron has a flavour of both those influences. So in the sign of Aries, we have a thirst for trying to find out and identify our individuality. But we need to be mindful that in the 6th house, we're using our identity or individuality in a way which does need to assist others. 6th house is very much to do with support services, providing any kind of way in which, by being conscientious, we're not being servile, we're actually doing something that is very lovely in a way. So we have an opportunity to rethink how we get the balance between our individual needs, Chiron in Aries, but also how we connect to others, but how we look after our welfare, the 6th house. So that's going to be particularly relevant through these 5 months. Now, in terms of Saturn, we often think about Saturn as being the area of our situation that we may really be punished in some way. And it's true that in transits, Saturn, transiting Saturn conjunct the Sun, as it might be for you if you're early born Pisces at the moment, or perhaps you're on the angle, you're early born Virgo, so therefore it's an opposition, or in turn early born Gemini or Sagittarius on the square. So those mutable planets will be affected by the journey of Saturn early in Pisces, for sure. But Saturn can be where we have opportunities if we really roll our sleeves up and work tirelessly. The difference with Chiron is however much we work, we won't necessarily always solve the inner relationship that feels hurt or broken. So for example, I have Chiron in the 4th house in Aquarius, which is a little bit more detached, but of course Aquarius can be about companionship and friendship. So I tend to have very long-standing friends, but that Chiron's very close to the moon, but it's also in the 4th house. When people have Chiron close to the moon, they often lose a parent very young in their lives. And my dad died when I was 8 and was very ill for a couple of years beforehand. So that was a big trauma. And obviously the 4th house is also about the family unit and also where we live. And both those areas have been tough for me as well. So, but one of the things that I think has characterized my life is that it doesn't matter where I go, someone will start telling me their problems. And I also have a Libra ascendant, which probably doesn't make it so easy to defend my time and space. But it means that people come to me for nurture and support. So my chart has a kind of Cancerian feel, even though those players are located in the sign of Aquarius. It's a bit more detached, a bit more futuristic, friendly, I hope non-judgmental on the whole, but very nurturing. But the nurture that I've craved in my life from people who by blood have been close to me, my son excluded, who I'm very close to, has been lacking. So that's a way of trying to understand how Chiron works. It is the area that we may feel that we give the maximum to others, and we may be actually very skilled at it. So for example, if you're someone who's got Chiron in the 9th house, you may be absolutely brilliant at teaching and training, or be linked in some ways to do with travel or philosophy. But you may feel in terms of those skills that you have somehow worthless, or that other people don't celebrate the qualities you've got. If you're someone who perhaps has, let's just take this completely randomly, Chiron in the 3rd house, you may feel that your siblings or people immediately around you in your community are not very attuned to your needs, but you actually may be a brilliant communicator, make people laugh. Could be someone who shares witty comment online. The 3rd house energy really seeing you do well around those instant communications, but you still may feel that your voice, 3rd house, isn't heard. One of the toughest positions for Chiron unquestionably is the 12th house. If someone has Chiron in the 12th house, particularly in a water sign, the chances are they are incredibly compassionate and empathetic, but certainly the 12th house can lead to bullying. 12th house, hidden enemies, and people pick up on those vulnerabilities and go for them like a pack. Really unpleasant, but all this information about Chiron, the sign it's in and the house it's in, and obviously the angles that are forged to that position are really critical. So I think over this next 5 months we've got an opportunity to balance this craving for individual recognition, Aries, and identity, with how we can be more virtuous about our welfare in the physical sense, which is of course the 6th house, and also the North Node nudging us on, but also we can be mindful of how we can help others and feel good about it, gain some satisfaction. So I've just picked out 3 celebrities to have a look at in terms of Chiron. The first, Elon Musk. I don't know much about him. Obviously I know that he's taken over Twitter because it's changed that quite a bit, and I know he's to do with Tesla, and he seems to be quite a controversial, outspoken person. But that's all I really know about him. Now, we don't have a time for Elon Musk, so what sometimes happens in these situations is a noon chart's created, but that includes an ascendant, which is not necessarily going to be correct. It could be broadly right in the right sign. So I've gone for a noon chart, but a whole sign approach with 0 degrees as the ascendant in the sun sign of his chart, which is Cancer. So that puts the moon the middle of the day at 10 degrees in Virgo, 29 minutes. But the key is that Chiron is in Aries, so that's interesting because that's where Chiron is at the moment. So he had his Chiron return about 2 years ago. Now, you may know a lot more about him than I do about what happened 2 years ago around his situation. But in this way of looking at his chart, Chiron ends up in the 10th house. So we have the need for understanding our personal identity in the sign of Aries. But in the 10th house, this is someone who has a lot of big vision, but very much he shines really when it comes to business and corporate stuff, although I understand that he's paid a lot of money for Twitter and it's not really working at the moment, it would seem. But this is someone who's certainly being a cardinal sign where his Chiron is, that's a big need to express ego. So what can we take in terms of the connections with other players in his chart? I haven't looked at this at all really, just so this is really quick. So I can just see that his sun is square his Uranus. So his Uranus is in this chart in the 4th house. Does he have a disruptive home life? I've read about him sleeping in the offices of Twitter overnight. That seems to make sense because if you're sleeping in an office, you're probably on a couch. It's not a formal home. So Uranus in the 4th house seems to fit, but also very much an innovator. And in the sign of Libra, another cardinal sign, this is someone that has a square with the sun, so an erratic life, particularly around where he lives and his family, because Uranus is so close to the 4th house cusp in equal house astrology, that's almost a given. But what about the connection to Chiron? Well, obviously Uranus is broadly opposite his Chiron, so it's around about 4 degrees apart. So there's some kind of incompatibility between his need for being an influential person and where he finds peace and security in his home life. But the real issue here is that Mercury squares up with Chiron, and Mercury's in Cancer, which can be a subjective location for Mercury because Mercury does best when it's able to be detached and logical because of its rulership of Gemini and Virgo. So in Cancer, the subjectivity of the rulership of the moon can make people much more sort of triggered really by their emotions. So I would say this is a person who's quite impetuous, sometimes speaks without thinking, and because his Mercury is in a square with Chiron, this is a person whose impulses are very are very difficult to control. So sometimes I feel that his own sort of need to blurt things out actually can be counterintuitive to his own success. But definitely with Chiron in the 10th house, he can be successful, but it has to be on his terms, with Uranus being so strong in his chart. He's also got a quincunx between the moon and Chiron. I don't know what his family life was like when he was a child, but the moon in the 3rd house means a lot of chit chat. Perhaps his father was very influential to him. I don't know, but there is an incompatibility there. It's not perhaps quite as strong as the conjunction, but it's certainly something around his home life may not have been easy when he was younger. I feel it was very disruptive, and that's still playing out. And in this chart, he also has Saturn and Venus in the 12th house. It strikes me as someone who doesn't trust people very much. So a lot of his life force comes from being dominant, but he may feel, and this is the wound, that people don't salute and recognise his talents as a leader as much as he would like. You know, that might be the case. Next up, J.K. Rowling. Now, I do have a time for her, and she has an interception on her ascendant, I can see. So ascendant's in Aquarius, so open to different ideas. It's also in the 2nd decan of Aquarius, very much attuned to Mercury. Mercury's also exalted in Aquarius, but the 2nd decan, the sub-rulership, Mercury, right in. That's interesting. But you can see the ascendant runs from 15 Aquarius to 15 Aries. So although she's got the position of Saturn and Chiron in her 1st house in the sign of Pisces, she doesn't actually have any of the house actually in Pisces. So it's an interception. So essentially, Saturn in the 1st house can be really tough in order for someone to develop their identity. And having Chiron so close by is right up there, if not harder, than having the moon in a conjunction with Chiron. But Chiron in the 1st house is someone who likes to help people, and can be someone who wants to, especially with the Piscean hosting of this is someone who could be very compassionate and really speak out for those who she feels in some ways are downtrodden. So she could be, and I think probably is, someone who's a very gifted teacher. I've never read her books. My wife has and really loves Harry Potter, and she tells me there is definitely a flavour of astrology in them. But this is a person who's really had to fight for her identity, because the sign of Pisces can be very compassionate in terms of Chiron, but Saturn brings a coldness there. Was her desire to be compassionate tempered by an early environment where she actually had very strict conditions which made it very difficult for her? What's given her this amplification of her identity in a way that ordinarily, for Chiron being afflicted by Saturn in the 1st house, would be monstrously difficult? What can we see in her chart? It's got Jupiter square Saturn and Chiron, almost exactly square Chiron. So what Jupiter can do on Chiron is it gives people the push to big themselves up in some way. Now, I'm not saying she does this in a negative way, but almost because Gemini is the host of Jupiter, it's afflicted in this sign because it's in detriment, but Gemini is very much about ideas. Jupiter can be about faith and belief systems, but the Jupiterian amplification of ideas squaring back to Chiron, so her way to deal with her inner pain may be to really keep pushing forwards with what she believes in, which I imagine would have taken a great deal of courage. Now, just looking around her chart, she does have Neptune in the sign of Scorpio, which is very imaginative, very spiritual potentially, and that's forging a beautiful trine. Now, Neptune also very much about imagination and visualization, so brilliant for a writer, and that's linking back in a really positive way to her Chiron and also to her Saturn. But right across her chart a little bit seesaw. She's got a predominance of planets in the 7th house, so she really reaches into other people's situation, but a lot of precision with them being in Virgo. Obviously, Venus is in its fall there. I don't know anything about her love life, but she does have Saturn opposite Pluto. So this is someone who has had to work so hard to reach into other people's needs. And at times I feel may have felt a bit empty around her own identity. But when we have Saturn in a connection to Pluto, it means that people have to fight for every inch of territory. Not an easy time at all. She does have a square, mutable square with Jupiter from the moon, which, you know, there's a warmth there. There's a generosity of spirit. Just looking again, she's got Mars in the 8th house, which 8th house energy for Mars is akin to Scorpio, the traditional, where Mars is the traditional ruler. So that's good for money. But it is in a quincunx with her Saturn. So again, balancing her individuality out with her investment in time and energy, the 8th house, where she's really devoted, but where she tries to connect. So this is someone who, for a first house Saturn and Chiron, is actually very tuned in to how other people feel and is really passionate about it. She also has Mercury in Virgo, as well as her Sun Moon midpoint. So this precision comes easily to this person, but this is a person, Uranus on Pluto, that can be someone who's very much the activist and quite outspoken to help those who are less fortunate. So really interesting that Jupiter is applying to her Chiron in a positive way, but I feel that because the moon, yeah, looking at it, the moon is in fact, she's got a T-square essentially between the moon, Chiron and Jupiter. So Jupiter is at the bottom of the T. So in order to feed herself, it comes through ideas, generosity of spirit. But I feel that this is a very intelligent person who works hard at understanding and relating others. But at times I feel that her own identity has not always been celebrated as much as it could. And perhaps that's why I know she's been quite outspoken in terms of the whole gender debate. Perhaps that's why she has spoken out, because her own identity may have at some level been not completely accepted when she was younger, and she may have an instinctive desire to kind of push back on that. Britney Spears, I'm being really truly honest, if I heard some music of hers, I probably know it because I've probably heard it in a pub, but I know she's very charismatic, you know, bright-eyed person. Her moon's also conjunct my moon, exactly, so I'd probably get on really well with her, to be honest. But her Chiron is in the sign of Taurus, which is very much about self-worth, but it's in the 8th house. Chiron in the 8th house people often have an instinctive understanding of sex. I imagine because she's a performer, and you know, obviously I've seen some of the images that she might be in skimpy outfits and so forth, who isn't in the pop industry, but it would seem that she has a particular sort of ease around that. But there is, I can see, a square between her Chiron and moon. Isn't it interesting? So J.K. Rowling's got the opposition with Chiron and the moon, and Elon Musk has got the quincunx, and Britney's got the square. I've got the conjunction. So, you know, when you have the moon involved in difficult angles to Chiron, you get pain, particularly with childhood. So what we've got with this person, like J.K. Rowling, she's got Saturn in the 1st house. She's had to really fight for her identity. I can see she's also got Mars in house 12. So maybe for her there's been a repetitive pattern in her life of not really knowing who she can really trust. That's also squaring up with Neptune. This is a person who gets a lot written and spoken about her that may not be factually right. She's been the victim of a lot of gossip. I feel that Mars square Neptune can be the trickster influence bar none. Brilliant for a magician, to be honest. Not so good if you're on the end of it, because it may feel that stories are always doing the rounds that aren't really fair to her. But what's the angles to Chiron? Well, to be honest, her Neptune by 5 degrees is in a quincunx with Chiron. So this lack of reality might feed into this feeling that she doesn't quite have control over her life. The 8th house is, of course, very, very psychological. So maybe for her, her 5th house is in the her moon is in the 5th house. It's brilliant for performance, and you know, and very imaginative in the sign of Aquarius, a bit different and quirky. But it seems to me that Neptune is squaring that Mars, and quincunx in her Chiron, and the moon squares her Chiron. So trust around her psychological situation has been not easy to come by for her, bless her. And with all that stellium of energy in Sagittarius in the 3rd house, she's a free spirit. Obviously, Mercury is afflicted in Sagittarius, but being so close to Uranus, it gives her a dazzle, a panache. She has a different way of doing things, this chart would suggest. What about recent events? Well, the move in Pluto, just briefly, looks like it's been hovering and going across her natal Venus. It looks like her midpoint's in Capricorn, and she has a south node in the 4th house. So pain around home and family in some way. And yeah, looking at it, Venus is square Pluto. That's one of the biggest influences you can get in astrology to do with leverage around money and power. So Pluto and Saturn in her 1st house, it's a fight for her to find balance, Libran, and she's got this very conservative family in some way wanting to sort of drain off what is more of a free-spirited nature, with the sun being in a sextile to the moon in 2 freedom-loving signs of Sagittarius and Aquarius. But her Chiron is actually craving for stability, self-worth in Taurus, but also money has been withheld from her, 8th house long-term finance, although I understand she has now got greater control over her own affairs. So Chiron for her may be an ongoing psychological battle, but there's a lot of energy in her chart which doesn't make her life easy at times, I feel. So it's really interesting looking at those 3 people. I just found their details, banged in the details, printed them off, no due diligence beforehand, and we can just see some real consistent themes. Perhaps one of the themes with the wounded healer being afflicted or in a tense angle to the moon is any lack of sukha around home and family pushes people hard to be very successful in their careers. You know, so maybe that's what happened with me with my dad. You know, that you're pushing to try to validate yourself some way or another. Now, please stay with me. I'm going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces. But remember, if you want to know where your Chiron is by sign and house, you can find that out by ordering your package from me for your year 24 forecast. Get the rest of this year free, plus your character analysis life roadmap, 10% off. If you don't know your time, you can get my solar approach, just like I did Elon Musk, and that will give you a lot of information. Or if you want to get the free download, 7 pages long on Chiron, please see the link beneath this video too. So Aries, there's an interesting synchronicity around this event because of the North Node having recently, on the 17th of July, the true North Node, have reversed into your sign. So that really is asking you to revisit the whole identity issue just when Saturn and Neptune are perhaps, you know, really asking some quite stern questions, or creating quite a lot of confusion in Neptune's case in terms of your more spiritual or psychological well-being. So you've got 2 energies that are competing with one another. And I did say when I did the year 23 forecast for you that this is going to be a year of endings for some things, but also a year of new beginnings. The problem with new beginnings is we don't necessarily see the outcome of the result straight away. You're more attuned to that than any other zodiac sign, because you often have the courage to go for something new, where other people are still sitting on their hands, umming and ahhing. You're going for it. You're in the moment, in the present, in a really sensational way. But whoever we are, sometimes things have happened in our life story, we've lost people, and we need to deal with that before we can free up the space to really focus on the present. So I feel that Chiron for you, along with the North Node in this retrograde, is asking you to think about how you can use that part of your nature that can be very sparky and very encouraging, how you can help others by pushing them to be more true to their individual selves. So that's the way you could help others. In the way you could help yourself, it's important that the advice that you give to others is the advice you give to yourself as well. So the first house is very much about the physical body. So if, for example, you're someone who tends to burn the midnight oil, you do feel stressed out by things, there are things that worry you, things that circulate around your thinking, this would be a good time to actually talk to someone. This combination of Saturn and Neptune in the 12th and Chiron and the North Node in the 1st, to try to liberate yourself from some old patterns or some old hurts and burdens that may be weighing you down. So this 5-month revisionary period of the retrograde can actually help you to get more in touch with the purity of you as an individual. Don't let that be compromised. You can be very encouraging to others who perhaps don't have your drive and passion, and perhaps at times even confidence to go for it as an individual. But if you have felt a bit lost or a bit pulled in two different directions, accept that anything you're starting new won't necessarily give you instant results. It is going to be a process. Now, Taurus, for you, Chiron is retreating in the 12th house, but you've just had the North Node go there as well. You could find yourself over the next 5 months, particularly with having Saturn and Neptune in your 11th house of friendships, of really being quite inspirational in terms of supporting other people who are not finding life easy, especially if you've got psychological insights. If you're someone who really understands fear, anxiety, you've experienced loss in your life, your ability to be very kindly, I feel, could be really amplified over this 5-month period. And whether it's looking out for someone who's maybe going through a big healthcare crisis, maybe even having terminal treatment, you would be someone who would have an ability to tune into that in quite the way over the next 5 months. Now, if you're somebody who is more rooted in the more physical plane, perhaps what Chiron is going to try and teach you, particularly with the North Node's support, is that our friendships or our connections to others are not just based on common interest. They can sometimes be based on more of a pull that isn't necessarily very tangible. So, for example, if you find yourself being drawn towards something, but your earthy nature thinks, well, yeah, but that's all a bit, it's a bit nebulous, I can't really see anything solid in that. Try and go with the process, because it could be quite revealing. Perhaps if you're someone who is very rooted in and very grounded, which is a very good thing, but you find it a little bit difficult to explore your dreams, or you think things like distance healing or natural medicine are a little bit sort of left field, give yourself permission to open up to those. Also, this would be a great time, I think, over this next 19 weeks to have some treatments. If you are someone who feels weighed down and not so good in your health, a great opportunity to have some nice reflexology or massage or shiatsu or chiropractic, anything which gets hands on your body, but also can inspire you, the 12th house energy, in terms of a higher purpose. So you're someone who can live in the tangible realm, which, you know, is really important. You're kind of like the glue that keeps the zodiac together, because, you know, we get the go for it energy of Aries, and then you take that energy and you conduct it into something more tangible, and that's the foundation, and then that creates the base for us then to start expressing our ideas through Gemini. So you're a really important sign. But if living in the physical plane has become really your sort of raison d'etre, you're being asked to expand your consciousness in some ways. Now, another part of having the North Node along with Chiron in the 12th house, and the two are actually going to be meeting in late February, is that if you have some deep-rooted emotional pain or psychological losses that you haven't quite grappled with, or perhaps you have some way of using escapism. Escapism can be great if we decide to sort of lie down and meditate for an hour, or perhaps we read a lovely book, or we go for a walk in nature. But if we're using other forms of escapism, you know, through perhaps a little bit too much alcohol, even prescription drugs can be a form of escapism. If there's some way that you're escaping your reality in that kind of manner, ask yourself, is there some kind of impact on you at a soul level which is not really so helpful? It might provide some kind of temporary release, but if you can dig down deeper to try to find what the cause of any unhappiness may be. So Gemini, what will Chiron in retrograde in what is your 11th house mean? Well, the 11th house is about the future, and it can be about our higher purpose beyond more physical goals and ambitions. It can be about friendships and the network. Perhaps, you know, with the North Node having moved into this area, there could be some shifts and changes around the collective that you're connected to. So perhaps some people that you have played a role as being, you know, that kind of friend that people pick up the phone to and you know, pour out all their stuff, and, you know, you're the good friend who's there, but actually they finish the call and they're gone, and there isn't really anything left on the table for you. Because you've got Uranus and Jupiter in your 12th house, these are very sensitive times for Gemini people, particularly Uranus, because maybe your nervous system has really been attacked by Uranus's square to Saturn that went on broadly for a couple of years, obviously not exactly. So that kind of amplified some sort of unconscious realities in a way which could have been uncomfortable. So sleep has probably been a little bit hard to come by at times. And then with Saturn and Neptune in the 10th house of work and responsibilities, that could be a little bit of a burdensome area. So if your connections to others seem that you're the person who's being, you know, the good friend, but you don't seem to get any respect back from others, that could be the part of your situation you need to reflect on. So how do you deal with this? Well, perhaps there does need to be some changes around some of your associations. You know, people can accuse you of being a bit fickle and changeable around your approach, your affections, and all the rest of it. I think most Geminis would actually be okay with that and say, well, that is true. But there will be people in your life that mean a lot more to you. So the people who you really, not put on a pedestal, but you have some kind of instinctive connection to in terms of a higher value, I don't feel that those relationships will necessarily be what is scrutinized. I think it's more people who perhaps are a little bit more fluid in your life. So with the Aries energy being quite immediate and needy, if someone's connecting to you and they're wanting something from you, it could even be through your work, so connections through work, I feel that you're going to be really evaluating whether some of those ties to you give you the sukha that those other people want you to give to them. The other thing to ask yourself, Is your long-term plan really in keeping with the person you've become? Because sometimes when we start that plan, we kind of get near to the destination and we've completely changed. We've evolved quite rapidly. And, you know, Geminis can go through a lot of changes quickly because your mind is always thinking about different ways of analysing things. And you do require stimulation. So the 11th house is about communication. It is about the collective. But you can't be connected to people in your collective if it's only you connecting to them and them not connecting to you. Blimey, that could be a rap song, couldn't it? So check out the quality of your friendships. Check out your long-term direction. If you're given to good causes, celebrate that. But you may have to accept that you won't necessarily get much celebration back. And I think that, yeah, you need to have sincerity around those connections to others. So Cancer, Chiron goes into retrograde just as the North Node has moved into the sign of Aries too. And because there is a solar eclipse on the 8th of April in the sign of Aries also, and Chiron and the North Node come together in a conjunction at the end of February, your role in life is going to come into sharp focus over this next 6 or 9 months. So if you're someone who's in a role where you feel it does gain you recognition, you do feel respected, you're remunerated for it, this may sort of play out for you less obviously. However, the converse could be true. You could have a good job, well paid, but don't feel that you don't feel any identification with it. It doesn't feed your soul in any way. So for some Cancer people, I feel that you could be thinking about your work, or if you don't work because maybe you're at a different part of your life, you're a caregiver or you're connected to your community. You know, if you are interacting to local community or council efforts, you know, you still need to feel that there's a purpose to that. So Chiron's going to be checking out, along with the North Node, just how fulfilled you are. So if you're not very fulfilled, a big change could come about around your career, but don't be surprised if you're giving lots of encouragement and advice, not a complete surprise to a Cancer person, to other people about their work situation and how they are manifesting their talents in the wider world. So Leo, for you, it's going to be an interesting time ahead, I think, because with the North Node just back into House 9, Aries, and also this retrograde, and then next year on the 8th of April, the solar eclipse, which is going to be in Aries too, your philosophies, which the 9th house governs, is going to be a big part of what the astrology is pushing you to look at. If you're someone who's quite entrenched in some of your ideas, you might be surprised by how they could actually evolve going forwards. You could find yourself with a really big desire to break out, travel more, you know, even go off in rather a spontaneous way. Your personal freedom is also going to be something that you may be relishing a lot more. But through to the end of this year with this retrograde, if your life feels quite penned in and quite repetitive and there's a lack of stimulation, or you feel that you're living to somebody else's credo, you know, is there someone around you who tends to impose their outlook and values on your situation, that could be something that becomes less and less tolerable. So you're going to be looking to bring greater variety and spontaneity to your life. And if you do feel physically trapped, you know, whether it's due to accommodation or a job or your circumstances, that could be something that's quite hard to bear. But if you have knowledge, you have experiences of places that you've visited a lot, the chances are that you're going to be advising others in a very imaginative way. So, for example, if you've ever thought about training to become a teacher or being a classroom assistant, or perhaps becoming a driving instructor or a travel agent, all those things which help other people to have more adventure or open up their thinking or learn more themselves. Perhaps you're someone who wants to publish something. All those things are going to become much more important to you during this next 5 months. So Virgo, if you're in a relationship and that relationship lacks intimacy, but that's something that you've been craving a little bit with Uranus and Jupiter in your 9th house, which has been pushing in a bit more of a desire for stimulation and things happening a little bit more off the cuff, and also of course Venus, more recently Mars, now your ruler Mercury in your 12th house. If there are some sort of things that haven't been really spoken through, or the air needs to be cleared, and one of the areas is to do with intimacy, this may be something that does need to be thought and discussed in the next 5 months. And also Saturn is in your 7th house, so the 8th house can be what makes way. So you're looking for some kind of evolution or transformation around the intimate part of the relationship, I feel, or in a more practical way, you're looking to make some changes that promote greater financial security, and how you jointly work with one another around resources can be part of that. What about if you're single? That's really intriguing, isn't it? I think if you're single, there could be a real sense of pain, to be brutally, truthfully honest, if you aren't getting the opportunities to connect with someone that you really crave for, which would be entirely understandable, because I feel that this time, particularly with the North Node gone into the 8th house, finding satisfying connections that go beyond just having, an attraction or good chat. It needs to be something that's deeper and more transmuting for you. So that's really what you're craving for. So it just depends on your situation. Alternatively, in terms of what help you can give others, you can be quite the whiz in advising people around their long-term finances, or even around their sex life. Because even if you're not seeing anyone at the moment, you will have had past experiences that have given you a lot of knowledge, and that could be an area that you can support and encourage someone that you're close to through this period of time. So Libra, if you've been joining me for some while, the whole Pluto saga has been a big part of our shared dialogue. Pluto in the 4th house of emotion, but also me saying about reinforcing your boundaries. So the North Node moving into the 7th house is undoubtedly going to bring opportunities around relationships, particularly with 2 solar eclipses in your sign, one on the 14th of October 2023, and then one on I think it's the 4th of October 2024. So there are going to be opportunities for you to manifest your individual desires, but your latent ability at relating with others, I don't think it's going to be diminished by that. I think it's going to give you more confidence. So what this Chiron retrograde and the North Node moving into the 7th house is saying is that the whole relationship scenario, which is so incredibly important to many of us, but particularly to your sign, because it's not necessarily just through romantic partnerships. You like to work with others. It is something that gives you a sense of satisfaction. That's really coming into the fore. So if you're in a relationship and it's not quite shaping up as you'd like, this retrograde is going to ask you to have to be really realistic with how things are. If you're looking for a relationship, your ability to understand where the other person comes from is the stuff of astral legend. The danger is you lose your identity by being so good at relating to them that they end up forgetting to relate to you at all, because they end up taking that for granted. So all the things that you're really skilled at have a chance to shine with those eclipses and the North Node in your 7th house. So Chiron in your 7th house is just reminding you of the past scenarios that have played out that have not been so satisfactory, where perhaps you've done too much for the other person. You've tried to save the other person at times, take the pain away from them. Or you've related to someone who's not really worthy of you. So watch that one in particular over the next 5 months. So Scorpio, the interesting thing about this event is rather like the natal chart. For you, Chiron in its retrograde, along with the North Node, is in the 6th house. So your ability to support other people, coach other people. You know, if you're someone who has a lot of knowledge about vitamins and nutrients, you could find yourself absolutely inspired over the next 5 months. But of course, the opposite side of the sixth house energy is that maybe your attention on supporting others is deflecting your need to pay attention to your own health situation. So it's not a time to be particularly too rigid about your approach to situations. Aries energy can be about what's fresh. The North Node moving into Aries, connection between the North Node and Chiron at the end of February, a conjunction, and also the solar eclipse, which is going to occur in your sixth solar house in April next year, is all pushing you to think about how maybe you could reform your life and make it work for you in a way which provides more satisfaction, but also slims it down, makes it a little bit more nimble. You're just focusing on the things that are really worthwhile. So if you do find yourself being a little bit scattered, not as virtuous in your approach to diet or exercise as you could, use this Chiron retrograde to address that. But also, if you're in a job or role which you find is okay, but there's little irritating bits about it, or perhaps someone's a bit picky that you need to work with, doesn't bring you much satisfaction, perhaps it's time to look afresh at what you could do going forwards. So Sagittarius, with Saturn being in your fourth house, that's quite a weighty reminder about any part of your emotional existence which isn't so good. But sometimes in life, a bit like a game of sport between two teams, we have to attack in order to gain some kind of movement forwards. And Saturn in the fourth house is more about defending. So with the North Node having arrived in your fifth house and a solar eclipse in April next year in your fifth house, the next 6 or 9 months are going to be really exciting for you to attack the areas of life and be more enterprising and more daring that you want to bring greater colour to. So for example, if you're in a love relationship which, you know, might be quite devoted, but if it's a bit workaday, you don't really create much time to get together in that more romantic dimension, Chiron retrograde here is pushing you to try to reinvigorate that flame of passion. Equally, if you're somebody who feels that your financial situation is a bit stuck, Chiron in the fifth house could see you thinking about ways that you can investigate some form of speculation that's affordable to you, but does give you some kind of growth out of where you are. Also, if you're someone who has children and maybe their pursuits are an area that you are interested in, but they may feel that they want more from you. And I think that the North Node and the solar eclipse next year could see you really investing more of your time and energy, but actually getting a lot from that. Now, in terms of what people will want from you, your experience really in terms of having fun, being quite sociable, is probably quite vast, because Sagittarians can often be very clubbable, and it could be that someone is going to seek some advice from you about their love life, their social situation, and you can find ways to encourage them based on your experiences. So Capricorn, you may find yourself having to look out for someone within your family. Not just because of Chiron's retrograde, but because the North Node has reversed into your fourth house. The solar eclipse next April is going to be emphasising this area too. Now the Libran solar eclipse, which occurs this October, is pushing you to seize greater recognition for your talents, but that needs to be toggled against these dependencies. So I feel that if you're someone who's very, very practical and perhaps more attuned to the physical world, the fourth house energy is more Cancerian, so you're being encouraged to tune in a more nurturing way, not just to others but to yourself too, and not being hung up about it. But you know, perhaps there could be someone that does need greater help from you in a practical way. You know, perhaps one of your parents may be getting a little bit older. Also, you could become more conscious of your early life story. If somebody close to you was a little bit unavailable, such as a parent, your pain around that could become more manifest. But if you're someone who is very happy and settled in your emotional life and also your home life, it could be that your kind and wise support can be very, very important to guide someone else you encounter. So don't be surprised if people are beating up after your door over the next year or so in terms of seeking your assistance, but it may not be, they don't want anything necessarily material from you, they just want you to listen and to nurture them. If that's something that you feel slightly uncomfortable with, that's going to be the lesson for you to learn to become more tolerant that people do have an emotional dimension, and it's okay to express those emotions. So that may be what you're going to gain from this particular retrograde. So Aquarius, you're a communicator, having the North Node having moved into the sector of everyday communication, and the solar eclipse coming on the 8th of April next year, your everyday communications with neighbours or siblings becomes a big deal, or a bigger deal than it is at the moment. But what about if you've got a sibling that you're not finding it easy to rub along with? That could become something that does need to be looked at. If you are lucky enough to have really good people around you in your everyday community, that can be something that's very enhancing to you. If you're someone with a gift with technology or teaching or training, chances are that you're going to sparkle in the months to come. But equally, if you don't feel heard, even though you're an air sign and a communicator, the pain of that could become much more visible within your psyche. So if you find yourself tongue-tied at moments, if you find yourself feeling a bit inhibited, if there is somebody around you that you find is a bit dismissive and you don't feel very recognized for the expression of your ideas, that's something that is really going to be quite profound over this next 5 months. Equally, if there was some sort of big situation in your life when you were younger around siblings that didn't quite work for you, you may find yourself thinking about that a lot. It doesn't guarantee that there's going to be a resumption of the relationship, but you may just be trying to understand the situation much more deeply in the next 19 weeks. So Pisces, the big question I'd like to ask you is, what's the state of play in terms of your self-worth at the moment? I don't necessarily mean how much you've got in the bank. Generally, if we have got a little bit of money behind us, it gives us a greater sense of security. The second house really appreciates that security. The North Node move in here is going to make you much more conscious of these strands over the next year and a half. And there is a solar eclipse coming next April, also gives you the chance to think afresh around how you use resources, but also how you view yourself. If your self-worth is pretty robust and intact and you have got some spare funds, you may use the healing power of Chiron to assist those who aren't so well off. So that could mean giving some money or some food to a food bank, for example. Second house, very much about food. It's possible that your abilities in terms of being very sensible and wise with resources, if you are in a very stable position, that you can advise somebody else who maybe finds this area a little bit stressful. But of course, having resources behind us, it's a bit like the Four of Coins in tarot. If we have resources behind us, but we're eagerly guarding them because we're so fearful of losing them, it doesn't mean that the energy around the whole subject works particularly well. So we can be cocooned in our isolated position of safety, but actually not very connected to others. And Chiron can be about that healing, can also be to do with perhaps in the second house, maybe natural medicine, I feel, because maybe herbs that are used to heal would be of interest to you. It's quite a Tauran vibe, essentially. So if you've been someone who's long wanted to sort of grow your own veg or cook more at home, this would be a great opportunity over the next 6 or 9 months to really incorporate those things into your life. You could actually make savings in some ways, but actually end up providing extra nourishment to your system and also to your soul. So those are a few of the things that I think will show up for you over the next 5 months in particular. Thank you so much for joining me for this Chiron special video. You can also check out my deep dive on Chiron by watching the link beneath this video, but do look out for that offer and also for that free download. But for now, please like, comment, share or subscribe.